Today's episode is brought to you by Huel. Yes, absolutely fantastic sponsor they are. You know what takes longer than making a full meal? Complaining about not having time to make a full meal. Well, Huel Black Edition is a plant-based meal that takes about 30 seconds to prep. Literally all you do is you take a scoop out of this bag. This is the Black Edition chocolate flavor. I'd recommend it. You dump it in here, you shake it up, and you are good to go. 30 seconds is probably the longest it will take you. And in there, you're getting 40 grams of protein, low sugar, no artificial sweeteners, and all the nutrients that your body needs. Look at that on the back there. Big list of nutrients. It's gluten-free. It comes in 9 flavors, and it costs less than $3 a meal. Oh, and your first order, you get a free t-shirt and a shaker. I got that one. It says Huel on it, so you know what you're drinking. So click the link in the description below or the pinned comments, or just go to huel.com/ITS or use the code ITS at checkout for 15% off plus that free gift. New customers only. And now back to today's episode. The hospital room smells of antiseptic and plastic. Machines blink softly as a small pale child lies in bed, barely awake. The nurse adjusts the IV line with care, determined not to disturb them. Across the room, the mother sits perfectly still, her hands folded neatly in her lap, calm, tired, and perhaps a little too still. She insists she has been here every day, sleeping in a chair, subsisting on whatever the cafeteria serves. She keeps a meticulous journal of symptoms, brings detailed logs, and shows the doctors photos documenting rashes, bruises, and unusual patterns of fatigue. She knows each medication by name, and every specialist on the floor now greets her by first name. To most, she appears to be a devoted parent, fighting for her child's life. Yet not everyone is convinced. One nurse noticed that the child's vitals dip when the mother is alone in the room, and the child seems to worsen only after home visits. The notes do not add up. The wounds are too sudden, too clean, leaving a trail of inconsistencies that raises serious questions. The doctors begin double-checking everything. Surveillance is requested. In the break room, someone murmurs a name quietly, as if it were cursed. Münchausen syndrome by proxy. This disorder involves a caregiver, usually a parent, almost always the mother, who deliberately fakes or even induces illness in the person they're meant to protect. It's not driven by financial gain or insurance fraud. Instead, it's all about attention, sympathy, and control. The caregiver keeps their victim sick to ensure they remain needed, seen, and even hailed as a hero. And they do it without a hint of remorse. It's not characterized by loud abuse or overt signs like broken bones or nighttime screams. Instead, it unfolds slowly, almost surgically, hidden behind a facade of kindness and concern. While not exactly common, its reality is indisputable. The very name is weighty, almost awkward when spoken aloud. Münchausen syndrome by proxy. It sounds like something taken straight from an old psychiatric journal, and well, technically, that's actually true. The original Münchausen syndrome described the faking of illness in oneself. But this variant takes things further, venturing into far darker territory. Here, the caregiver projects that false sickness onto someone else, typically a child, occasionally an elderly parent, or even in rare cases, a pet. The clinical term now is fasciitis disorder imposed on another. Doesn't exactly roll off the tongue either, but it's more precise. At its core, a caregiver fabricates, exaggerates, or directly induces medical symptoms in someone under their care. They lie to doctors, tamper with test results, slip pills into food, inject foreign substances, and even smother, then resuscitate, just enough to keep the illness going. Never so much as to raise alarm. At least not initially. The motivations behind this behavior are complex. It isn't about money. This isn't insurance fraud or medical grifting. Instead, it's about identity, validation, a desperate need to be seen as the devoted, suffering parent, the one holding everything together. It's the mother, whispered about in admiration. I don't know how she does it. It's also about control. Nothing makes someone more dependent than being so sick they can't function without you. And it works, because the victim, usually a child, rarely knows any different. They grow up believing their body is fundamentally broken and that their mother is their savior. She is indeed saving them. She's saving them over and over again. Every test, every hospital stay, every pill adds another meticulously crafted layer of dependency, a distortion where pain masquerades as love. It's rare, but not as rare as you might think. Doctors miss it, friends ignore it, and schools step back because on the surface, these caregivers seem like saints. As they cry in waiting rooms, maintain stacks of folders, and even bring cookies to the nurses, they know exactly how to play the part. And the more attention they receive, the deeper they become entangled. Estimates vary, largely because this form of abuse is so hard to detect. Some studies suggest it affects around 1 in 100,000 children, but experts believe that figure's likely too low, estimating it could be as high as 30 per 100,000. The problem is it hides too well. Many cases are misdiagnosed, misfiled, or never reported at all. In hospitals, nurses sometimes refer to it as a rule-out diagnosis because you don't consider it until every other possibility has been exhausted. While headlines tend to spotlight the most extreme cases, smaller-scale versions are likely more common. These include parents who exaggerate symptoms just enough to remain in the room, those who doctor hop for attention, and caregivers who allow their children to believe they are weaker than they truly are. The numbers might be fuzzy, but the pattern's very real. You can see it across countries, income levels, and age groups. It doesn't affect only mothers, though it is most often seen there. This is the kind of abuse that doesn't require a raised voice, it only needs enough trust to go unnoticed. And it can stay hidden, sometimes for years. When people hear about Münchausen's by proxy, they often think of it as a theoretical concept, strange edge cases, or merely a psychological footnote. But it's not abstract at all, especially if you end up in the hospital bed. Take Gypsy Rose Blanchard, for example. For most of her childhood, everyone believed she suffered from leukemia, muscular dystrophy, and a host of other chronic illnesses. She used a wheelchair and had a feeding tube, while her mother, Dee Dee, claimed that she had the mental capacity of a 7-year-old. They were inseparable, always smiling in photographs at charity events, fundraisers, and award ceremonies. People donated money, trips, even a house, and strangers wept over how brave they both were. But none of it was true. Gypsy could walk, she could read. Most of her diagnoses were fabricated, some entirely invented, others exaggerated until they became her full-time reality. Her medications made her sick, her muscles atrophied, her teeth rotted. And yet, she believed it. For years. Because why wouldn't she? Her mother was her world. Eventually, Gypsy figured it out. She escaped, first in her mind, then in body. The end of that story is bloody and complicated. Gypsy managed to convince her secret boyfriend to murder her mother before they both fled. In the end, she was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Then there's Marybeth Tinning. Over 14 years, she lost 9 children, each dying before the age of 5. 9 tiny coffins. 9 funerals. Her community enveloped her with sympathy. Doctors whispered about genetic mutations and undiagnosed conditions. Neighbors dropped off casseroles. Priests offered blessings. Everyone believed she was cursed. The deaths started in 1972 and continued almost rhythmically until 1985. Each time, the explanation was vague. Seizures, cardiac arrest, sudden infant death. Nothing added up, and no one pressed too hard. After all, who could understand a person burying child after child without losing their mind? Yet the truth crept in slowly. The timeline just didn't add up. Some of the children had been adopted. There were no shared genes there. Meanwhile, a pattern emerged during hospital visits. The child was healthy until left alone with Marybeth, and then suddenly not. Still, she was protected by a wall of disbelief. The idea that her mother could intentionally smother her own baby was too heavy for most to accept. Eventually, she confessed to smothering 3 of them, though she later claimed that her confession was made under duress. Ultimately, she was charged with only the murder of 1, the last child, Tammy Lynn, and that conviction was enough to send her to prison in 1987. She was denied parole 6 times, and every single time the board cited her lack of remorse. Yet in 2018, Marybeth Tinning finally walked free. And then there was Beverly Allitt, later dubbed the Angel of Death. Allitt worked as a nurse at Grantham and Kesteven Hospital in Lincolnshire, England. With her bright smile and soft voice, she was exactly the person you'd want watching over your child, a responsibility she carried out in the children's ward. But between February and April of 1991, something wasn't right. Children admitted with mild conditions suddenly went into cardiac arrest. Some stopped breathing, while others developed seizures they'd never experienced before. Medical staff rushed in to revive them. Some children were saved, others weren't. The survivors were left with lasting damage, brain injuries, and physical disabilities. The numbers didn't add up. There were too many cases. It was too fast. Allitt was present
For nearly every incident, she was always the one who discovered the collapse, either in the room or just outside. She cried with families, stayed late, and offered comfort like a professional mourner. Yet behind those tears, something far more chilling lay hidden. She had been injecting her patients with insulin, potassium, and even air. Silent, deadly, nearly impossible to trace. She wasn't just hurting them, she would watch them die and then help respond. That was the performance. It wasn't about killing without being caught. It was about being seen. Eventually, patterns emerged. Blood tests failed to match records, and suspicions soon led to surveillance. Ultimately, she was arrested. Beverly Allitt was convicted of killing 4 children, attempting to murder 3 more, and seriously harming 6 others, 13 victims in total. In 1993, she received 13 life sentences. She didn't look like a killer at all. She looked like every other nurse, until she didn't. And what ties all of these cases together isn't the method. It's the mask. They all knew how to appear caring, composed, and tragically resilient. They didn't shout, they didn't hit, they didn't need to, because they possessed something even stronger. They possessed trust. Hospitals are built on trust, that fundamental bond among patient, caregiver, and doctor. You walk in sick, they believe you, and they work to fix what they can. That is the basic exchange. But what happens when the sickness isn't real, but instead deliberately induced? In many cases of Münchausen by proxy, the caregiver doesn't burst into the hospital demanding immediate attention, nor do they scream or throw tantrums in the hallway. Instead, they build a case methodically. They compile files, maintain detailed charts, and offer thoughtful, emotional, and seemingly helpful insights. They're polite, they're engaged, they're thankful. This careful, considered behavior is what often misleads medical professionals. Doctors and nurses are not trained to doubt genuine concern. When a mother says her child stopped breathing during the night, there isn't a moment for demanding proof. You just act. When she reports that the symptoms occur only at home, you adapt your approach accordingly. You believe her, because to not would seem unfeeling. Meanwhile, the child remains quiet, tired, confused, or sometimes simply too young to speak at all. So the tests begin, medications follow, procedures get scheduled. Some kids end up with feeding tubes, oxygen masks, and even unnecessary surgeries, scars they never understand, pain justified by people in white coats. And sometimes, only sometimes, someone on the medical staff starts to wonder, why aren't the symptoms showing up during monitoring? Why does the child deteriorate after weekend visits? Why don't the test results match the story? Even then, raising suspicion remains risky. Accusing a parent, even one who is attentive, present, and exhausted, is a difficult line to cross. No one wants to be wrong. No one wishes to risk alienating a family in crisis. Münchausen by proxy doesn't come with an obvious red flag. It arrives dressed in empathy. And so it slips through. Not because doctors don't care, but because this kind of harm doesn't look like harm until you really zoom out. But by then, damage is already done. Münchausen by proxy doesn't announce itself. There's no loud entrance, no screaming or bruises. It blends in seamlessly. That subtlety is exactly what makes it so dangerous. Still, if you know where to look, the pattern begins to emerge. The first red flag is medical inconsistency. A child might see multiple doctors, bounce between clinics, and display symptoms that shift or intensify while test results remain clean. Nothing quite adds up. Diagnoses come and go. 1 week it's seizures, the next it's anaphylaxis. It creates a long history of unexplained conditions that never settle into a clear cause. Then there's the over-involved caregiver. Ever present and always speaking on the child's behalf, they remain calm even in situations that should trigger panic. It's not merely a display of composure, it's a deeply ingrained preparedness. They arrive with binders filled with records, detailed medication lists, and comprehensive timelines. They correct doctors, argue over diagnoses, and push for more tests. On the surface, it reads as diligent involvement, yet beneath it all lies something off, a need for attention that seems just a little too insatiable. You might also notice that the child's illness seems to follow the caregiver. The child worsens at home or when alone with the parent, yet stabilizes when under observation in the hospital. It's subtle and it's easy to dismiss, but it happens repeatedly. Isolation is another red flag. Some children are pulled from school and kept away from other adults. With fewer people watching, fewer questions are asked. Friends, teachers, and even other family members may be pushed aside. And then there's the child. Sometimes the child appears passive, quiet, too scared to speak up. Other times they begin to internalize the narrative, truly believing that they are sick because they repeat what they've been told. And why wouldn't they? That story has come to shape their entire world. Spotting this kind of abuse requires recognizing a pattern, not just one odd visit or an offhand comment. It's the accumulation of signs that matter. It's hard to imagine, and that's exactly what allows it to persist. Just because someone appears to be a devoted parent doesn't mean they are. Sometimes devotion is merely a disguise. The end doesn't always resemble justice. Sometimes it comes in the form of a nurse noticing something amiss, a social worker asking one extra question, or a child finally declaring, "I don't think I'm sick." Other times it emerges as the result of a mistake, a caregiver caught on camera, or test results that just don't add up. And even when the truth surfaces, it doesn't mend everything. Once authorities intervene, the situation can spiral quickly. A child might be removed from the home. A parent could be arrested, evaluated, released, or quietly redirected. Some face prison, while others don't. Courts struggle with these cases of abuse because the damage is psychological, intricately layered, and often built on years of carefully cultivated records. How does one prove something that is just so intangible? The children, they're never left unscathed. Even when they're freed, the harm lingers. Many of them spend years believing they're sick, defective, or broken, growing up immersed in medical jargon, fear, and dependency. That damage doesn't vanish simply because someone declares it wasn't real. Some never fully recover, while others heal physically but continue to struggle mentally. The sense of betrayal runs deep. Then there are those like Gypsy Rose who didn't just escape, but exploded onto the scene. Her case ended in murder, trial, and a complete media frenzy. Some called her a victim, others labeled her dangerous. The truth refused to settle neatly into one box, and how could it? There's no easy narrative when it comes to Münchausen by proxy, no clean or tidy resolution in sight. This isn't a story of exposure and punishment. It's about untangling years of manipulation, deep-seated beliefs, and profound loss. And even when the truth finally emerges, it doesn't bring the relief one might expect. Instead, it ushers in a period of silence, space, and the long, painstaking work of trying to determine what was ever real in the first place. Some monsters don't look like monsters at all. They wear scrubs, bake cupcakes, cry in waiting rooms, and know the nurses by name. They sit by hospital beds with trembling hands and worn faces, quietly whispering, "I just want them to be okay." And we believe them, because we're conditioned to. Because questioning love feels inherently wrong. Because what kind of person would hurt their own child? And yet it happens, quietly, over the years, in bedrooms, hospitals, and even cars parked outside pharmacies. It hides behind the language of care, healing, nurturing, protecting, and uses our instincts against us. We naturally look at devoted parents and assume goodness. Thank you for watching.